Our Across the Aisle segment tonight, the Pope has spoken out now on fake news. He says spreading disinformation is probably the greatest damage the media can do. He reminded us that it is a sin to defame people. Maybe Google should listen up then. The search engine giant is squashing the truth within their own algorithm, caving to pressure to hide statistics that show black men commit more crimes than white men. Statistics, by the way, that come directly from the FBI crime reports, but are almost singularly reported on by conservative news organizations and ignored by liberal outlets because they betray the false narrative coming from the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's just one example. Joining me now, history professor and author of Obama's America, A Transformative Vision of Our National Identity, Ian Reifowitz. Ian, good to see you.
Hi, Liz. Good to see you always.
All right, Ian, this fake news phenomenon, it's becoming quite the talking point here. But to me, control of fake news, or the idea of controlling or censoring fake news, is just control of free speech. Am I wrong here?
Well, I looked into the matter you brought up with Google, and it seems that it comes from an article on InfoWars, which interpreted, I would say, really pretty wrongly what's actually happening over at Google. It linked back to an article at The Guardian, and what The Guardian described Google doing is something very different from what InfoWars described. What Google did was it was informed that right-wing, tech-savvy hate mongers are manipulating the search engine, which is far above my pay grade as a technology user, but they're manipulating the search engine so that when, for example, you type in Jews are, and Google puts in the next word which is most popular, the next word that's most popular that comes up is evil, so that you start typing Jews are and you get Jews are evil. And this manipulation means not that Google is hiding the news, it just means that—
I understand. I understand it, and I don't think that white supremacist websites or ideology or anything should be promoted in any way by people who can manipulate the search engines. Not at all. Google themselves, though, is guilty of doing something similar to this. They did this during the election. When you looked on there and said Hillary Clinton, nothing about any of her scandals came up. Yet when you Googled Donald Trump and let it drop down all these nasty things about Donald Trump, in my opinion, that it just comes back to the same thing. Controlling fake news, controlling what drops down on these search engines in news, it's not going to be objective. It's going to be subjective to whomever's opinion is carrying this out, and it's going to end up squashing somebody's free speech.
Well, the only institution that can squash free speech is government. That's what the First Amendment. That's why the First Amendment covers government.
Right.
And Google is a search engine. It's not hiding the information. It's not making the information disappear. It's just making sure that the algorithm isn't manipulated, that it reflects some kind of true search. I mean, just for example, until recently, one of the other ways that it was manipulated was that if you typed in, is Adolf Hitler evil, 8 of the top 10 sites that came up were neo-Nazi sites because neo-Nazis manipulated the system. The same thing was with the Black Lives Matter statistics. It's not that anybody was hiding those statistics. It's that if you started typing black people, you got black on black crime as the only thing that came up for the first 3 dozen hits.
Right, that's what I'm saying, though. Those are, someone is deciding whether or not that's worth coming up in the search engine. And perhaps it's not First Amendment because that applies to government, but it is censorship. And do you not agree that that's a slippery slope for even a private company, one such as far-reaching as Google or Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, one where everyone gets their news from these places? Is that not a slippery slope to have them censoring, deciding what we should think is more important and what we should think is nasty?
I understand what you're saying, Liz, but I have to disagree. I think what Google is doing there is countering an artificial manipulation. It's not as if the citizens of the world or even the users of Google were deciding in an organic way that those were the topics that should come up when you start typing black people. It's that activists and right-wing people who understand how to manipulate the system made it come up that way, not in an organic way, but in an artificial way. All Google was doing was attempting to restore the organic search engine function.
No, and I don't agree with that, because every time I've heard that, and you just said it right now, you're only referring to right-wing or so-called right-wing websites or organizations that are supposedly propagating this biased content. I mean, how can you target just one side here? Is it 100% right-wing and 0% Democrats? Because I haven't heard of any Democratic organization or website that's being squashed.
That's a fair point. I'm not familiar with what you brought up about the campaign. And what Google needs to do is figure out how to make sure that the search engine works organically and that nobody from either side is doing that. The topic we were talking about today was about the Black Lives Matter or the black on black crime. And so that's the one I'm more familiar with. But no, I think Google has a responsibility to make sure that neither side is manipulating the data and manipulating the search engine, so to speak, because that's controlling what people see in an artificial way.
And I see it opposite. I see Google being the controller of this flow of information. They're deciding, they're telling us what we want to see, what's worth seeing. And it kind of goes in, I mean, you're a college professor, you deal with this. It goes into the idea of a safe space, that people should only be seeing what they want to see. They should only be hearing what doesn't offend them. That's not good for people. People are intelligent people. We can decide what we want to see, what we want to find. If it's not on the first page of Google, it'll be on the second page. We're not stupid. We don't need someone else making those decisions for us.
I have to tell you, I disagree. I think an artificial manipulation of the system does alter the collective understanding of what is true and what is not. If you type in, "Is Hitler evil?" and most of the sites you see are Holocaust denier and neo-Nazi websites, that's distorting the truth. Those people are distorting the truth. Google has to act as a neutral referee to make sure that the system isn't being rigged.
But giving someone the power to be a so-called neutral referee, that's giving them the power, that's the danger, because right now you agree with what they're doing. Right now you do. But what if someone else comes along 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that you don't agree with and says, you know what, Ian, I don't agree with what you're saying, so I'm going to label it as fake news and you're no longer allowed to say it.
First of all, there is a difference between truth and fake. Let's not lose sight of the fact that there is an objective reality. Second of all, if Google doesn't do what we're talking about here, then the people who are manipulating the site and the search algorithm, they're controlling what we see. So somebody's going to be controlling what we see. The best option is to level the playing field and get rid of the rigging, because it's the rigging that distorts the truth.
Right, and in your opinion, this should not be done by government at all, because if government's the answer here, outlawing fake news or government being involved in lobbying Google and Facebook and Twitter, that's essentially the same as state-run media.
100% I agree with you, Liz. No government involvement.
Okay, good. No government at all. Ian, it's always a delight having these conversations with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. All right, guys, our final tipping point of the night, the 5 most egregious fake news stories from 2016. That's straight ahead.